Chair. Thank you, Acting Commissioner, for coming before us today. I appreciate, again, the hard work of the men and women at the CBP. I just want to follow up on something really quick. When did the soft-sided facilities pop up? When did we start enacting those at the border to handle the surge?
It would, I believe, fiscal year 2021. I can't remember the exact date we put the first one up.
Right. So I visited the border in late spring, early summer at Eagle Pass and had a chance to see that. How much is that costing every quarter?
So the soft side facilities right now are about $991 million a year.
A year. So nearly $1 billion a year going to these soft-sided facilities that could be eliminated if we would control the southern surge at our border. And I know CBP is stretched thin. I'd rather see those resources go toward stopping forced labor materials from coming into our country, interdicting those drugs. And this could all be eliminated with a different posture toward immigration at our southern border. And I think that's a goal of mine at this committee is we want you to be able to strengthen CBP's efforts at our southern border. You've been stretched thin. The challenges you're facing surge at a historic level we haven't seen. That's been under this administration since 2021, exponentially worse than we've ever seen. And I'm extremely concerned about the number of known terrorists and criminals who have come across our southern border as a result of the weakness, not as a weakness of CBP, but as a weakness of policy at our southern border. And nearly a year ago, I actually wrote to you and ICE Acting Director Johnson asking for answers about how a suspected member of the terror watch list was able to not only get into our country, but be released by CBP into the Homeland and ICE as well. So I never got an answer from either agency. Very disappointed in that. And I'd ask you to respond to how this disastrous situation could have occurred in the first place, and what are we doing with the funding that we are giving you to make sure that this does not happen again?
So, ma'am, thank you for the question. I'm not aware of the particular instance, but I can tell you, how the process does work.
Right. This was a person who was apprehended in Arizona, released into the interior, and then apprehended again in Florida. But this is a person who was on our terror watch list, so we can't let this happen, right? I mean, this is a vulnerability for the safety and security of our country, is it not?
Well, so I concur that we cannot allow it to happen, but I can tell you how the process works.
Yes, please explain. Yes.
So when an individual, well, number one, we have developed a number of, so I'm not aware of this individual citizenship, but we have established a number of partnerships throughout the Western Hemisphere, whether it's biometric sharing partnerships or sharing of information of folks entering the hemisphere. So we are continually monitoring that information and working with our foreign partners. But when the person crosses the southwest border and is apprehended, we will take the biometrics and we'll run the biometrics.
And I've seen that in person, the intake. How are you communicating then with these other agencies under the Department of Homeland Security?
So I used to run the National Targeting Center, which does all the coordination for CBP. So what will happen is the Border Patrol agent will apprehend the individual, and if the person's on the terrorist watch list, they're mandated to call the National Targeting Center, and they will coordinate with the Terrorist Screening Center, the Threat Screening Center, to determine if that person is a possible match or not a match.
So where did this weakness come then, where this person was not caught in that?
Well, so again, I'm not aware of the particular instance. I'm more than willing to walk through that particular case, but I can tell you if the person is a match, then we would turn that person to ICRO and they would put them into removal proceedings. It could have been an instance where that person was determined not to be a match, and later on additional information came into the system where it was identified to be a match, and we are continually vetting those individuals, so we would identify that and coordinated with ICRO to apprehend that person, pick them up, and put them into removal proceedings at that point. So we do have a layered approach. If somebody is released, we will identify them and we will go apprehend them. And I'm more than happy to look at this particular case and determine exactly what happened. But like
I think that's my goal, is to make sure this does not happen again. And obviously this I see as just a massive hole in our security, and anything we can do to make sure that we're not releasing these kinds of people into our country. I mean, it makes us all less safe, and that's what keeps me up at night. I've got 10 and 12-year-old boys. The last thing I want in my community country is to be less safe and secure. And we know that people are literally going all over the country, so huge concern. And I'm almost out of time, but real quick, wanted to ask a question about the CCP, because we have seen an increased influx in Chinese nationals, obviously coming across our southern border as well. Can you touch on what the CBP is doing to counter kind of that initiative from the CCP in exploiting the weaknesses or vulnerabilities, whatever they are doing to obviously take advantage of that to get more people into our country?
Yes, ma'am. So we work very closely with the Joint Terrorism Task Force and the Counterintelligence Task Force, led by the FBI, number one. Number two, with the Chinese migrants specifically coming across the southwest border, it is the third largest migrant population in the United States. And historically, we have seen a number of, surges up and down with Chinese nationals, both at our ports of entry, in between our ports of entry. And I can tell you with, as you pointed out, the oppressive regime, the religious persecution, and the fact that these folks couldn't travel for the last 3 years because of the COVID lockdown, it's not we expected that we would see more Chinese migrants coming into this hemisphere. So what I can tell you is we will identify how they enter the hemisphere. We will work with Department of Justice, Joint Task Force Alpha, and HSI to identify the networks that are smuggling these individuals into the hemisphere. We'll work with the Colombians and the Panamanians because we know that they're coming through the Darien, and we'll try to disrupt these transnational criminal organizations. When they do get to our southwest border, we will ensure that we're running them with our partners, LE and IC partners, against the databases, and then we will we'll take the appropriate action based on those results.
Thank you, and I'm out of time. I'll yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Henson.